In the beginning, God was king. In his garden, there was more than plenty. But Eve thought she was empty, so she turned away from her king and found herself in a barren kingdom. Yet, God promised one of Eve's offspring would be his new king. One of Eve's sons would buy back his kingdom. One of Eve's sons would redeem them. But Eve's children were threatened by infertility. Her emptiness passed down God's family tree. Sarah's empty womb could bear no king. Rebekah's barrenness could bring no royalty. Rachel's infertility could not fill a throne. But Eve's daughters would not bear their emptiness alone. God gave each a husband with whom they could reproduce. But this is not true of widowed Naomi and her daughter-in-law, Ruth. Like Eve, Naomi left God's land only to find herself in a barren kingdom. And now their husbands are dead. They have no king or royal heir to redeem them. Yet because of God's promise to Eve, one of Ruth's offspring would be his new king. One of Ruth's sons would buy back the kingdom. One of Ruth's sons would redeem them. For the barrenness of Eve's family tree had to be filled, and so did Naomi's. But the price of that redemption is high. The cost of what was lost is great. For not only is Naomi barren, she cannot afford to buy back her estate. So Ruth takes on Naomi's emptiness. She promises to take responsibility for her family tree. She goes to secure God's provision, and in the process would find a king. At a neighbor's farm, she begins to glean, picking discarded scraps of grain for Naomi. But the land belongs to a man named Boaz, who has more than enough food to eat. Like a king, his gardens and fields have no emptiness. Ruth would no longer need to see herself as empty. She would not need to turn away to any other field. Boaz promises he alone will provide. He alone will fill. In fact, Boaz would take full responsibility for Ruth and Naomi's needs. He would fill their emptiness with more than plenty. Yet, the main way God would provide for Ruth and Naomi wouldn't be through the food Boaz provides, but through his family line. For Ruth comes to find that this man who had so generously gone out of his way to feed her was in Naomi's family tree. He could be her redeemer. Naomi knows this means Boaz can buy back her estate. Since he is related to her, he can keep the deed in her family's name. And maybe he could fill her barrenness too. But Naomi is far too old, so this redemption would have to come through Ruth. If Boaz takes her as his wife, their child would save Naomi's line. So one night, after Boaz brought in the harvest, Ruth seeks to fill Naomi's emptiness as she had promised. She brings her need to the one who can redeem, to the one who can buy back Naomi's land and continue her family tree. Ruth proposes to Boaz, asking him to spread his wings, take her in, and with Naomi's burden, carry her. And generously, Boaz agrees. He agrees to marry her. Again, Boaz takes full responsibility for Ruth and Naomi, but this time he would not just bring them wheat, but bring life to their family tree. And to show just how costly this responsibility will be, another redeemer refuses to meet Naomi's need. He had first right to preserve her line and territory, so Boaz brings their need to him at the city gates. He tells them Naomi and Ruth are his to save if he is willing to pay the price for their redemption that would have to be paid. But the cost is too high for him, the burden too great. So, like a rich king, Boaz gladly takes the price of redemption on himself. He will be the one God would use to fill and to save. Boaz marries Ruth. Their union provides a redeemer and redemption for Naomi. Ruth is no longer empty, for she has turned to her rich groom. Boaz will give her a child. He will fill Ruth's womb. But Ruth passes down her fullness to Naomi's family tree and emptiness. She would give up her only son to fill Naomi's barrenness. This is how God fulfilled the promise he made to Eve. For one of Naomi's offspring would be God's new king. One of Naomi's sons would buy back the kingdom. One of Naomi's sons would redeem them. This is how God has always acted. For Sarah's empty womb would bear a king. Rebekah's barrenness would bring royalty. Rachel's infertility would fill a throne. For God never leaves any of Eve's daughters empty or alone. And this story is completed in Mary. She's another woman, a virgin with another empty womb. But this time, there is no husband, and there is no one like Ruth. So God himself would be Mary's rich groom. As God promised, Mary's offspring is his new king. Mary's son will buy back his kingdom. Mary's son would redeem everyone. And this son is Jesus, the son of Eve, the son of Ruth, the son of Naomi, the son of Mary. Jesus is God's rich king who, like Ruth, takes responsibility for our emptiness, and like Boaz, gives us his fullness. At great cost to himself, Jesus, God's only son, fills all our barrenness. Now we can come to Jesus like Ruth came to Boaz. We can bring our need to the one who can redeem, to the one who can buy us back. So bring Jesus your emptiness, your need, your barrenness, your infertility. Like Ruth, propose to the final king who can bring you into God's garden where there is more than plenty.